All right, we've got FAAB leagues, free agent budget, and this is where you bid dollar amounts on players who are on the waiver wire. Now, some leagues run FAAB every night. Some leagues run FAAB on Tuesday night and then turn it off, and it's just free agency for the rest of the week. So that's tough too. I think you should absolutely, unless you have a high budget, but if you have $100 budget, which is what all of the leagues I'm in are, you should absolutely allow $0 bids. Don't make people waste $1 to pick up a kicker or a DST or something. But managing your FAAB is interesting, Dave. Give me some FAAB tips for the people in FAAB leagues. And by the way, just my personal opinion, FAAB is the most fair and best way to do ad drops. So I recommend it. But Dave, how would you tell people to manage their FAAB throughout the season?
It's also the most fun way to do it. I'll tell you how I manage the FAAB, and then Heath, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I like to think of it as I've got a ticket for one, maybe two players that I really, really got to have over the course of the year. And so I will spend up to get those players when I think I have to. And it's more of a have to decision. For example, you referenced that Isaiah McKenzie and Isaiah Pacheco were both on the waiver wire in a lot of Scott Fishbowl leagues. I would like to have them on my teams, but I did not do a great job drafting receivers in the Fishbowl. Big shocker. So I feel like I need Isaiah McKenzie. So I'm going to put in a bid that's pretty big so that I get him on my team. I feel like I need him. I would start him this week. That's how bad my receivers are. But for all the other players who I want, the bid's going to be really small. Just a few percentage points of whatever the FAAB is. I'll give you an example. Here's two examples. So Amir Abdullah is on the waiver wire. I've got a running back who I'm never going to use in Fishbowl. I put in a $1 bid on Amir Abdullah. If I get him, great. If I don't, it's not the end of the world, and I'm probably not going to get him. I've got a $0 bid put in on Kyron Williams just to speculate on Williams for the first week of the season. That's what I'm talking about with players that I want but don't necessarily need. In the case of Isaiah McKenzie, I will tell you right now, it's going to be at least 15% of my budget. And if I really, really needed him, like for real needed him, I'd be talking about like 40 to 60% of the budget on those types of players who I really need. No, I am not going to put in that much on Isaiah. I heard that well. It will not be that much because I don't need him that badly. And I still want to be able to save some of my budget for the rest of the year. There's a whole year, a whole season that has to be played. I don't want to use it all now on McKenzie.
Yeah.
And then you have to go struggle later.
Need to give a little context here, right? Because you're talking about Scott Fishbowl, which has really deep rosters and very thin waiver wires. If you're in a league where Isaiah McKenzie is on the waiver wire and you like him, the Scott Fishbowl, okay, you may not get that many opportunities for a player, even like Isaiah McKenzie. I mean, the waiver wire is terrible in the Scott Fishbowl. Just because the roster,
but it's the same principle applies.
No, but it's not, because there's no way you would ever spend 15% on a guy like Isaiah McKenzie in a regular 12-team league with 5 or 6 bench spots.
What if you really needed a wide receiver?
Oh God, I think spending 15% on a guy like McKenzie for like a sleeper wide receiver, that is too much money.
Can I tell you some of the receivers that I've got?
In what? No, I don't want to hear about the Scott Fishbowl because it just doesn't apply to. It doesn't apply to most people's leagues. It's much deeper, and the waiver wire is much thinner.
I wouldn't go so far as most people's. I mean, maybe over half. But there's a lot of 20-man roster leagues out there. All the FFPC leagues, all the football guys draft league, like those are all 20-man rosters. So, I would agree with Adam in a 5-man bench, 15-round draft league. I would not go probably more than 5 on Isaiah McKenzie or a player who was being drafted in the double-digit rounds that I thought had an upside of wide receiver 30.
Yeah, and
what if you were really thin at receiver though?
But you've said, well, I think that like your argument, because you've talked about McKenzie and you think he's going to be an 11-point per game guy, maybe a 12-point per game guy. One of your reasons for drafting running backs this whole time has been that you can find 11 or 12 points from a wide receiver off the waiver wire. It's not that hard.
Potential 11-point guys, yes.
And that's what McKenzie is.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So I think just in general, I mean, how aggressive should you be the first time a backup running back, an Elijah Mitchell type, comes onto the waiver wire?
If you think he could be a league winner for the rest of the year, go get him.
What does that mean?
Especially if you need a running back. It's the need versus want discussion that I just had with you 2 minutes ago.
Yeah. I just like, I mean, I'm not spending 80% of my budget in week 2 on a player.
I might. Yeah, I might. If I thought he was
If
a
you
league
had
winner.
known what Elijah Mitchell was going to be last year, you would have sank every penny of your
He missed
fab.
like 5
into him.
games.
He helped you make the playoffs and advance in the playoffs.
I don't know. He has to. If you spend that much money, and it happens a lot where a manager will spend, 60, 70, 80% of his budget on a player. Sometimes managers spend 100, as long as they have $0 bids available to them. That happens. That's not uncommon. I don't do it because that player has to be great for you in order to justify it. And there are just going to be so many times throughout the year where you need help at other positions. And if you don't have any money, it's tough. It can be difficult. So these are different philosophies. Heath and Dave say, if you can be that aggressive, I'm more conservative.
I just looked. Elijah Mitchell in our salary cap league last year went for $55 to Ben Gridge.
That's a big bid. And that was at a time when we weren't sure if Elijah Mitchell would be the guy for San Francisco. At a year ago, we thought that Mitchell was good. He was okay in the game. Would Trey Sermon really go away for the rest of the year? Would the 49ers find somebody else? What happens when Jeff Wilson comes back? There were questions. It wasn't a guarantee that he was going to be great, but you had to take the chance. You had to take the chance if you needed a running back. So what's your philosophy, Adam? Just because it sounds different than mine.
Yeah, no, I like to have. Okay, my philosophy is if there's an available player in week 2 or week 3, whatever, there are going to be more must-have guys throughout the year, and you have to keep that in focus. So don't completely eliminate your options later in the year. And you're going to have a better chance to get those guys later in the year if you conserve your fab a little bit and have, it can be a little bit of a bully. It's kind of like my strategy in auctions or salary cap drafts. I like to save my money for the middle portion of it so I can get the guys I want. And when other people have spent big early, I'm not saying that I'm completely opposed to spending big for a player that I think is going to be great, but I've seen too many examples of a waiver wire addition who everyone thinks is going to be great, and it just doesn't pan out. I remember, James Starks years ago for the Packers became a starting running back, and we thought he was going to be great, and he just wasn't. And that happens more times than you think. Chuba Hubbard was a guy who lost his passing downs role, and he wasn't nearly as good as we were hoping. So, like if Christian McCaffrey got hurt again, Chuba Hubbard, what should he have been worth based on how good he was last year? I would say something like 12 to 15% of your budget, and I bet he went for over 30%. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But that's the risk you take.
So right now, you're saying if McCaffrey gets hurt, what should Foreman go for?
No, what should he have been last year? Because he had a good stretch down the stretch.
Right, and he had an opportunity when Derrick Henry went down.
Well, he came out later, in the process. So hopefully you wouldn't have had to spend that much because there wasn't as much money out there. And if you would, I would say, to answer your question, 12 to 15%.
Yeah, I think you're not going to get very many backup running backs with that type of strategy. But if you have running backs, it's okay.
Yeah. All right.
And you could bid that much, and maybe you will get 1 or 2 and still have a decent amount. If you only get 1 or 2, you'd still theoretically have maybe 50% of your budget left over that you could spend on one more need player that comes along the way. Last year, that would have been Rashad Penny or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Those guys were awesome. They were worth it late last year. And we get to a point probably in like round 10 or week 10, I should say, where we tell you, you're going for it. You're making the playoffs. Drop everything you have left in your fab on a player and hope to get him. That's the advice in the second half of the year when you're trying to make a playoff run. And there's a player you need to help you make that run. Just use the rest of your fab by then.